The relationship between Luffy and Blackbeard is quite interesting. Many would say they have beef with each other, y'all. If there is, it is really one sided, in my personal opinion. Luffy is holding up the beef by himself, really. Because Blackbeard, that man don't seem like he got no beef towards anybody. He just be doing his thing, living his best life, trying to achieve his dream, really, in my personal opinion. But from Luffy's side of things in this beef, Luffy seems to dislike Blackbeard and has some anger towards him. And this is mainly due to him beating Ace, him giving Ace over to the Marines, and then Ace being sentenced to death, basically. But also at the same time, he's also intrigued with Blackbeard as a character. And the big thing I haven't said is that I don't think Luffy hates him at all, really. From every point in the story, I never got the feeling that Luffy hates Blackbeard at all. Now, I know people would say that Luffy showed hate towards Blackbeard when he met him in the Impel Down because, Blackbeard was talking that cash money at him, and he was telling him that I'm the one that beat Ace. I'm the one that, that gave Ace to the Marines and all that, right? All that jazz and stuff like that. But I really wouldn't call that hate. I would call that being angry in the moment, right? You got to think about it. Luffy, in the moment, his emotions are hiding here. He's right in the mix of trying to get Ace back here, right? So he's emotional, right? He's emotional, right? And you see the anger more out in the moment, right? In my personal opinion. But later on, after the time skip, when you see him hear Blackbeard names a couple times after the time skip, he doesn't have that same anger that he had in the moment. I think sometimes in the moment, you're not thinking straight. You just going off straight emotion. You're gonna have interactions like that, right? Out of just straight anger, and you might seem that you hate this person, but after time and stuff like that, you might not have that anger or that that quote unquote hate. He might be still angry at him, and he still might want to give him a good pound and stuff like that. But hate, I think, is too strong for this situation. I think it's mostly anger and frustration that he couldn't save Ace. That is really what it is, in my personal opinion. After the time skip at Fishman Island, Jinbei informs the Strides that Blackbeard has become an emperor, right? Luffy shows no real emotion in that moment, right? He thinks back on the first time he meets Blackbeard at Mocktown and his meeting at Impel Down, right? He don't show no emotion, no anger. He's not clenching his fists or anything like that. He got that same kind of blank stare that he had when he first met Blackbeard in Mocktown and he gave that epic speech, right? That same stare, which is odd, right? The funny part about this is he has a completely different reaction when he hears Akainu name, because Jinbei brings up Akainu, right? He lets the Straw Hats know that Akainu is the new fleet admiral, and you see Luffy's reaction, and there's some anger there, right? In his face, he grabs his chest where he was scarred at. Like, I think, in my personal opinion, I think he hates Akainu a lot more than he hates Blackbeard, in my personal opinion. I think there's real beef between him and Akainu. Even in Dressrosa, Luffy does not crash out on Jesus Burgess when he sees him for the first time. He doesn't do nothing, which is surprising, right? And then he sees Jesus Burgess again having a conversation with Blackbeard on the snail, right? Then Luffy comes over, he talks to Blackbeard a little bit. Blackbeard still, he talking his trash and stuff like that, talking about, Jesus Burgess is going to get the fruit, and it's going to be like I have Ace in my crew and stuff like that. He talking that cash money, right? And Luffy still doesn't do nothing. Now, I know they have a plan, about infiltrating Dressrosa and stuff like that. But when have we known Luffy to follow a plan? Hardly ever, which is very, very surprising, right? When I think about it, having hate for someone and his people, I would imagine it's on sight. You know what I'm saying? And this is why I don't see that Luffy hates him. Like, this is one of another reasons, right? If you hate somebody, it's usually on sight. Most people can't control their hate. They gonna go and straight off emotion, and it don't matter if it's Blackbeard or one of his crewmen. You going for the blow, right? You going to get your get back or something like that, right? And Luffy doesn't do nothing, and that is surprising, right? And that's why I don't really see hate. Yes, there's anger and frustration there because of the Ace situation, but I believe Luffy is intrigued with Blackbeard because what Blackbeard preaches about, what he talks about, Luffy doesn't disagree with him on, right? They are like-minded in what they believe in terms of dreams and freedom. But where Luffy's beef with Blackbeard is going to reside at is in how Blackbeard makes his dreams and freedom happen throughout the story. The big part of the reason why this beef is really one-sided is Blackbeard himself. If you really think about it, Blackbeard doesn't have any hate towards Luffy. He never really doubts Luffy. He never underestimated Luffy throughout the whole story. Like, there's not one point in the story where you see Blackbeard like going after Luffy for like vengeance or like anger or nothing like that at all. Like, at one point he was going to go get Luffy to, basically do the same thing he did with Ace to become a warlord and turn him into the Marines. But outside of that, it's nothing really personal. With everything is for him to achieve his dream, in a sense. Like, everything that he has done is for his own dreams, to accomplish his own dreams in his own way, in his own freedom. And he's doing everything in his power to become the Pirate King. Not once I felt that Blackbeard was trying to do something to Luffy personal. Like, honestly, like, that's what makes Blackbeard so great of a villain. You could argue that, Blackbeard is one of Luffy's biggest believers. The whole time, he has never doubted Luffy at any point in the story. The very first example of Blackbeard having belief in Luffy is in Mocktown, when he gives that legendary speech to Nami, Zoro, and Luffy, when Zoro and Luffy let Bellemere and his crew beat him up in a tavern, right? Within that speech, he basically says they want to fight. People dreams have no end. They can laugh at us when you aim high. Sometimes you come across fights that's not worth fighting. And then he also, the last thing I want to mention, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, I hope you can go to Sky Island, right? That's the last one of the things he says as well, that this is all belief in Luffy. Like, this is all belief, and this also aligns with the values that Luffy has. And this is why it's hard to say, how heightened is their beat, because these things right here, man, like, people dreams have no end. Luffy believes in that. If you think about it, this is one of the very first lessons that he learned from Shanks, about they can laugh at us when you aim high. Sometimes you come across fights that's not worth fighting, right? That is one of the things that Shanks taught Luffy. And that's one of the things Kid did never learn. Captain Kidd was out there hurting civilians, because they were laughing at him, saying that he's gonna go get the One Piece, right? But this is one of the very first lessons that Luffy learns from Shanks, is sometimes you come across fights that's not worth fighting. It don't matter if they laugh at you, they don't got no belief in you. Sometimes these fights are not worth fighting. This is belief from Blackbeard right here, that I hope you can go to the Sky Island. That is something, that's belief. That's somebody that's not laughing at your dream or at your goal in that moment. Like, Blackbeard truly meant that, man. He meant that. And you find out again later at Impel Down when he mentions it again. And like, that's what I'm saying. Blackbeard is just a great villain, because a lot of villains have some type of vendetta or like angst against the protagonist, but Blackbeard doesn't really have that. Like, everything is that he does is for his dreams, for his own dreams, his own goals. Another example is at Impel Down, when Luffy says he is going to save Ace. Blackbeard replies with, "I'm not going to say that is a waste. Anything is possible in this world." Right there, that's another example of belief. Blackbeard knows there's going to be admirals. That's going to be the fleet admiral there. There's going to be so many obstacles in his way, in Luffy's way, to try to save Ace. But he doesn't say that it's not impossible. He says anything is possible in this world. That is belief right there. He knows Luffy is not ready for the admirals, but even still, he says anything is possible in this world. That is belief in Luffy. That is not doubting him. That is not underestimating the man. Like I mentioned earlier, Blackbeard then goes on to say, "I told you Sky Island is this," and then he also mentions the One Piece is this as well, right? And this right here, man, is saying that I ain't laughing at your dreams. I'm not laughing. I'm not somebody that's doubting that nothing is possible in this world, man. Like, Blackbeard, man, is so good, bro, because everything that Luffy believes in terms of dreams, freedom, and not believing anything is possible, Blackbeard also does. And this is why Luffy can't disagree with him. It's just that it's how Blackbeard goes about trying to achieve his goals and freedom and his dreams. Right, that's when they differentiate at. The last example of Blackbeard's belief in Luffy that I want to talk about is when he sees Luffy's title of being called the 5th Emperor of the Sea. All Blackbeard says is he is too soon for you to be called that. And this is another example of Blackbeard's belief. He doesn't say that it's never going to happen. He's not saying that it's impossible for Luffy to be an emperor. He just saying that it's too soon, that he is not ready yet at the moment, which we know is true. If you watched Whole Cake Island, that you know that Luffy was at that point in time was not on the level of the Empress. He could not be Big Mom in that moment. He would have got packed up with the ease. He barely beat Katakuri, and he barely beat Cracker as well in that Whole Cake Island arc. Like he wouldn't have done nothing to Big Mom in that moment. Like, just being honest. So we know that it was too soon for him to be called an emperor, because he was not there in that moment. And it got reconfirmed when he went to Wano and he got packed up by Kaido with the ease. What Blackbeard's saying right here is true, but he still believes Luffy gonna get there at some point. So this is belief right here. That's why I say Blackbeard doesn't necessarily hate. He doesn't underestimate Luffy. Like I said, their relationship, Blackbeard's and Luffy, is gonna be interesting to see what happens as the story progresses, because they are similar in so many ways, but they are different in how they want to achieve their dreams, like their actions to get to that point.